Hey, this is DizzyPW with OnRPG, and we're starting up episode 2 of our podcast. We've got our returning champions, JamesBlonde, Hhean, and Mikedot here. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
What's up, guys?
Hello.
Hey, what's going, everybody?
And then we also got we got 3 new people with us. We got Mikedot's brother. Howdy.
Hey, what's happening, people?
And we got Shannon Doyle, also known as Leliah. She does our try-on coverage at OnRPG. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone.
And then we got a famous person on the panel today. You might have seen him on our forums before, but we have Spunkify, Michael Dunaway, straight from MMOhut.
Hello. How's it going?
And today's podcast, we're going to be kind of recapping what we saw at E3, get some opinions, some general feedback. So first topic on the thing is Tryon was going all in this year. They had End of Nations was looking better than I've ever seen it before. They had their customization on display, and they've got, of course, Stormlegion coming out, which is just awesome. So Shannon's kind of the expert on this. You want to start us off with your big impressions on it?
Well, I was at first kind of worried that Tryon maybe had too much on their plate, but it seems like they're doing a really good job, and they've got everything covered.
Yeah, and Michael, you actually got to interview the head of the Petroglyph Studios on End of Nations. What do you think?
So I get to see End of Nations, and definitely a huge step forward. For those that don't know, Petroglyph actually formed out of the old studio that used to work on Command and Conquer series. So they already have a lot of background knowledge as to how to make an RTS. And they kind of took that and evolved it into this MMORTS. Because typically when we see MMORTS, we think of like browser MMORTSs because that's where we see that the most. But they've actually taken it and made it more than 50 players. And the actual layout itself was really intuitive. There's not a lot of base building or anything like that. It's more of just managing your sets of units and managing those resources to actually call them down and use them. So it's a much more frenetic fight actually. There's not kind of like a build up time really of building bases and units to actually collect resources. It's just kind of in your face action from the get go. And with up to 50 players or something like that, that's quite a RTS battle right there. So I'm really looking forward to it. We didn't actually have 50 players when we played it at E3. We had, I believe, 4 to 6. But it's still you got a really good sense of how the actual battle was going to flow. And it was really a nice intuitive system because you could kind of bring in other types of units if your set of units that you kind of cycled to start with weren't working. So you could bring in artillery units instead of like your more mobile, close range units. And you can kind of cycle through those to kind of pick which set of units work best in a situation. Now, there was a penalty for that. There was a cooldown that you didn't have any units on the field while it reset. But once you were able to, do that tactically, I can see that being a huge dynamic changer because a lot of times in RTSs, if you get set in one build type or one unit type, and then the person counters you, you don't really have anything else to do. You've kind of just lost the game at that point. Because there's not a lot, you have to retech into different areas, and if the other player is, really good at what they're doing, they're not going to give you that chance. But in Innovations, being able to swap in for a different unit type almost instantly, with a small penalty cooldown, really gives it this kind of even flow of going back and forth on the battlefield. So I thought that was actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, definitely. And how about the customization in the game? This is the first time showing it. You can paint your units however you want. You can kind of add decals and stuff like that. It's almost like a tabletop game. What do you think of that, Shannon?
Well, I'm a huge fan of customization. I think that's why I enjoy MMOs so much. My only real concerns were pink tanks. That's really not cool. But other than that, I thought it looked fantastic, and I'm actually not really a big fan of those types of games, but I might actually give this one a try.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to seeing some articles from you on this. Moving on, Snail Games is putting their foot down pretty much. They were kind of made a splash with The Chosen. It was a decent browser, not really browser game, but kind of like a Conquer style game, and now they're just stepping up a notch with their Flexi engine with Age of Wushu. Some of you guys got a little glimpse of that. What do you guys think on Age of Wushu?
It's
Jumping.
definitely. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Go for it.
I was just gonna say it does look like they're keeping to the whole
like Wushu thing, like leaping around, doing complete nonsense. I mean, that to me seems like the core of the game. You hull about off walls, jump on water, beat people up with ridiculously over-the-top attacks.
That's one of the big cool parts about it is the fact that, I mean, you don't really have a leveling system, so it's not like, oh man, I'm going to sign on today and go grind these monsters and get a level up. It's just, I'm going to sign on and do whatever I feel like, and maybe I'll progress, maybe I won't. It's going to be a mystery.
It's definitely. I think more MMOs need to follow this kind of path because it's. I really like the idea of having more sandbox elements in MMOs. So it's just not more like a gear race, or it's not going to be a destination. It's definitely going to feel more like a journey.
Yeah,
You're not living your life in a Skinner box.
Yeah, Michael actually got to interview one of the head developers. What do you think?
Well, I got to see a lot of the high level skills, etc. And one thing that's really stood out in my mind is every time you log into an MMO, you kind of have this feeling of I want to progress in some way. And one of the challenges with having no levels and nothing like that is how do you have a sense of progression? And it's more of a true sense of progression in Age of Wushu that when you get in, instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to get a level, you're going to think, oh, I'm going to learn a little bit more in the school of, martial arts, or I'm going to, progress it in this area, so you actually have tangible things that you progress in, and that's what you shoot for rather than just shooting for a level. And I really thought that was really cool. And then one of the systems that just blew me away was the fact that depending on where you logged out, you became an NPC in the game, which could be then, kidnapped or stolen and put into slavery or a brothel. And I thought that was really a interesting touch because it really dictated, where do you log off in a game? Do you just log off, on the top of a mountain? Do you log off in town to progress a skill, but, risk being stolen or risk being kidnapped? And then also you'll have guilds that I bet, will kidnap people and then sell them into slavery. And then that will be their that they're like this PvP style guild that just people have to watch out for because they're just going to go and like put bounties on people's heads and stuff like that.
Thing that really blew me away about is the fact that you have a hidden personality on your character that you can't really look up, but it's based on all of your actions. Like when you're running through town, do you go and bump into NPCs and other players all the time, or like do you kill players out in the open? Stuff like that like impacts it. So when you're actually forming a guild, your guild's goal is to take over one of the 8 martial arts schools. And it's a really wild concept because instead of just being a guild full of like randomly invited people, you actually have to invite people that would qualify for like the teachings and style of this school, or else they're going to be useless to you towards like taking over this school. So it really adds a new dynamic to guilds, and that you literally have to like play together, be the same type of people. If you want to join like the Tang like poison school, you have to be poison makers, you have to be devious, you have to like mess with players when they're offline. But if you that kind of player and you want to like join the high ranking Shaolin monks, they'll spit at you. They'll be like, we want nothing to do with you. So it really kind of like adds a good element for people like role playing.
Definitely. I've been getting into role playing a lot. Definitely seems like it could be a really big hit with role players. Speaking of random, though, I heard there was one other feature in the game called random NPC encounters, where basically just NPCs can come and attack you at any given time, depending on the your current status or whatever quest you're on. So that adds an interesting dynamic, but it also seems incredibly random with just any kind of situation. Because I heard like one player, as soon as they started playing, like it was like no less than like 5 minutes into the game, the person gets attacked by ninjas out of nowhere. I thought that was kind of funny, a funny way to introduce players to the game. Like, that's like saying, like, welcome to Age of Wushu, now die.
And nothing says death like ninjas. Come on, that's awesome. All right, guys. What's up?
Yeah, another interesting thing I was going to say, I heard that the game has a really cool combat, like, and the stamina system, the combination of the two and whatnot. Do you know any more about that?
Oh, yeah, the stamina system. So basically everything you do in the game kind of detracts from your stamina, and it's you use it for skills and all of that. It's kind of like a secondary mana system. And so if you're just spam happy at the beginning of a fight and your opponent just focuses on countering, your guy is going to be tired as hell and not be able to unleash his ultimates, and they're just going to go to town on you because you're not going to be able to counter as well. And the same system, like if you run out of steam and you're like doing some aerial battle or something, either they're going to have air superiority on you or they're going to like knock you underwater and hold you down. There's a lot of crazy elements going on there.
There's also a internal and external damage system whereby they can inflict internal damage to you, and when they inflict internal damage to you, your stamina regen decreases. So basically, during a fight, obviously, your stamina will be going up and down depending on abilities you're using, and it just regenning, etc. But if they inflict internal damage on you, then your stamina regens slower. So you can use less abilities and do less evasive maneuvers, etc. So there's also the thing of trying to cripple the enemy player so that he can't use his abilities, and especially crippling him when he's low on stamina as it is makes it so where he can't really do much at all. But they basically outlined it as a rock paper scissors system to where certain abilities and certain types of kung fu will counter others. And you can kind of cycle through them as you fight an enemy player. So if you recognize what type of kung fu they're using, you can then choose your abilities that you have available that will counter that kung fu back and forth, etc. Because you can counter abilities with the right-click mouse button. There's actually like a defend stance essentially. But that defensive stance can be countered with a well-placed and well-timed ability from a different stance of martial arts. So
yeah, I mean, we could do an entire podcast on this game. It's definitely a contender for game of the show, but I want to try and move on. We got some good interviews up on MMOhut if you want to learn more. We got a good article series on OnRPG. You can check it out there. But next up I want to talk about is Elder Scrolls Online, because this is kind of the first time it was revealed at E3. I'm curious because I haven't seen like other sites' coverage of it yet. What do you guys know about it so far?
Go ahead. It looks like it has a lot of inspirations from Dark Age of Camelot. You got the 3 large factions, and then you got all the players all vying for control over who gets to become the emperor, which is odd because it's chronologically set before all of the games. So I guess your progeny, if you're a cat person, suddenly become humans.
Yeah, it's kind of weird like that, but I mean, it's got a cool system going for it. It's got like 100-man versus 100-man battles that, from what I saw in the demo, they really smooth. They really work out, and even like the guy said, like the people in the office that really know how to play, they're always the last one standing out of that 100-man. So it's not just your typical clusterfuck. They're actually like focused fighters, and like there's tactics and strategy involved. The thing that caught me off guard is the combat system in the game is more akin to Guild Wars 2 instead of Skyrim. And I feel like that might kind of turn off some of their target audience that they're aiming for, because first of all, it's going to be difficult to steal people from Guild Wars 2 after how much hype it's gone. But secondly, the people that are going to be drawn to an MMO expecting this combat, they're going to get into it and be like, oh, this isn't what I wanted. What do you guys think?
Honestly, I've read other. I mean, obviously they only let one person in the booth, so I didn't get to go in and look at it like he did. But I've read other people's coverage. I've read like PC Gamer's coverage, and it just looks like they're so scared to do anything innovative that they kind of just said, okay, we're making an MMO with a few things that are kind of new to MMOs today, but not necessarily groundbreaking. And we're going to set it in the Elder Scrolls universe, and that's what's going to be its main draw, is that it's in the Elder Scrolls universe. And it's kind of in the same line, I think, with like Star Wars, the Star Wars MMO, and that you spend all this money on like making sure that it's set in a certain universe, etc., like that, and you spend money making sure like the ambiance is great, which is fine, but then you forget about things that make MMOs exciting, and that's the gameplay. And really, kind of that feeling with a lot of what I was reading from people's coverage is that it was an MMO that would have been great 5 years ago, but nowadays with Guild Wars 2 and PlanetSide 2 and all these MMOs coming out that are really pushing the boundaries of what you can do in PvP and PvE, it didn't seem like it was that much of a step forward.
Yeah, I mean, but let's be honest, it's been working for Rift to just take things from before and then kind of one up the competition. They might be able to pull this off. It's going to be intense, though. It's a very, very competitive summer to launch a game, and I'm not
Oh,
exactly sure why they chose this particular time.
oh, I was going to say Rift went out into a different market. I mean, it didn't have to go against Terra, which looks like it's doing fairly well. It didn't have to go against Guild Wars 2, which is looking like an absolute behemoth currently. It didn't have to go against PlanetSide 2, which is looking slick as hell. There's so many other games now that are doing new things with the MMO genre, and unless they really are pushing the boat out, you can't really be sitting on your laurels right now in the MMO industry.
The game's been in development since like 2005. Like, there's not much they could have innovated since then because they're basing it off of 2005, MMO thinking, and it's kind of been it was being developed in parallel with Skyrim, but it was being developed with a separate studio. So it was kind of like they were collaborating with Bethesda, but they weren't actually working directly, underneath Bethesda essentially. So a lot of what's coming out of it is just not true to Elder Scrolls. I mean, a lot of people that like Elder Scrolls like it for the combat, and the combat's completely different in the MMO. It's more of like a traditional MMO combat.
I'm going to have to stop you there. I of all the people I've spoken to, I don't know anyone who likes the Elder Scrolls for the combat. It's always the exploration is always like the core thing with the Elder Scrolls, is being able to just go anywhere, meet anyone, do anything you like.
I'm talking about the type of combat, like you mean
like the first person?
Yeah, it could be third person too, but it's the action. It's that you swing your abilities, you use everything, and there's not really a sense of I have a hot bar, I'm using abilities, that kind of thing.
God, I love the combat. What are you talking about?
Maybe I'm spoiled from like Guild Wars 2 combat and like all that kind of stuff, but I just went from Red. People weren't impressed.
We can't turn this into the Guild Wars 2 how great is the combat, because I honestly podcast because I could talk at length of how much I love the combat in that game, about everything I love about that.
Already going over time, so let's move on to the last topic, and that's going to be Game Mania's Core Blaze. Now, I freaked out when I first saw this title a year ago at the Game Mania game show. I couldn't stop talking about it for like 2 months because in my mind it's pretty much all right. There's like the true action combat is the big thing coming out right now. It started with Vindictus and Dragon Nest, and then it kind of went on to it was C9 as well. There was the one side, the fast-paced, frantic, who can do your fighting game combos the most. And then Terra came out on the other side with Unreal 3 engine, and they were more about the slow, methodical, like chess-based combat, block your front line off. And I see Core Blaze as being more on the Terra side of the true action combat. But Michael, you actually got to play it for the first time. So what was your first impressions at E3?
So, first impression was it felt much more like a console game than it did a PC game. But that's understandable that, a lot of the controls are more intuitive currently in the current build. It's pre-alpha right now that, for a controller, because you have essentially two skill slot systems. One system is for abilities, and another system is for items. Like there's a lot of items that you can actually carry with you, like bombs, kind of like napalm that you can throw down and throw like a torch on top of it. And it also has like a health potion, mana potion system, and those are all controlled with a controller by your left and right bumpers. But on a keyboard, it was a lot more. I guess hard to control, I guess it would be the way. But as far as combat goes and how it actually felt really good. It reminded me a lot of all those, kind of action-oriented, console games, but with a more open world feeling that you don't get in a lot of those PC-style games, like Dragon Nest and Vindictus. Those are very closed world. And while there are instances in Core Blaze, I was surprised to see a lot of the areas are open world, so you can go and complete quests in kind of this forest. Well, we were shown this forest area. But you can go and complete quests in this forest area, and it's completely open. So it kind of looks like a level that would be in Vindictus, or it looks like a level that would be in Dragon Nest. But instead of just you and just monsters that are there for you, it's for everybody, and everybody can be in there, and you can be fighting a boss, and then somebody comes along and starts helping you out with that boss, etc. Which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I totally thought we were actually in an instance until we left party and we're like, oh, hey, we're still all here together. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really unique. And one of the devs actually had me go into a cave, which I thought was pretty cool. When you're in the cave, it's really, really dark. And one of the party members, it's best if one of the party members actually opens or holds a torch in their inventory so that it gives you light, because there's things on the ground that can be like traps or holes that will kill you. So it's kind of cool that you actually have to sacrifice the maneuverability or combat of one of your party members in order for you to traverse these, dark passages in these caves. Otherwise, you're just gonna like fall into holes and die, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I kind of felt about it when I played in Taiwan. Is it's got kind of a Legend of Zelda feel going to it. There's traps. There's crazy items you can pick up. Even like Legend of Zelda, where you set your hotkey for your items. That's kind of what the controller feels like if you play it with a gamepad.
Yeah, exactly.
And the dungeons themselves, they're not just like, oh, go through the labyrinth with like set doors that open. You go like you climb up vines, you shoot across ledges, you like jump instant death chasms if you miss them. It feels more like an action console game, like you were saying.
Yeah, there's a couple things I didn't like about it. Right now, range combat is kind of really wonky. The way range combat actually interacts is a lot less maneuverable than melee combat, and it doesn't really feel. It feels like you have like one ranged ability, and then your secondary. You have two auto attacks currently. You have like a light auto attack and a heavy auto attack on every class, and on a range class, your light auto attack is your range ability, but it locks you in place, and then your heavy attack is actually a melee ability, which I thought was really weird for a range class to have a melee ability that's their heavy attack. They actually have to run in to actually use that auto attack. Another little thing was that when you drink a health potion, it actually locks you into place where you're at and performs the whole animation, which is it was a little bit annoying for me.
Which is also interruptible, by the way, so you might not even get the full potion if a boss hits you while you're drinking it.
Yeah, that seemed a little weird. Like I can understand interrupting it, but locking you in place, especially if you're like trying to survive after getting hit by a big monster and you need to take the health potion, just seems like it's a little bit disruptive of like.
That pulls you out of the console feel, right?
Yeah, it kind of makes it more like, oh, I'm static, I'm stuck in this place, I can't move until I'm done.
To clarify on that point, since I'll ask you two who were actually playing this game, so the reason that's a problem, I'm assuming, is you can actually move while attacking, or is it like Terra where you actually get locked when you're trying to hit?
You can move while attacking. In fact, most of your attacks move you themselves quite a distance.
Except for the ranger, the range class, which is one of the beefs I had. When you attack with your bow from range, it locks you in place. You can't move around and just fire arrows like you can in like Dragon Nest.
So I'm finding it kind of interesting that I compared Core Blaze as like an evolution of Terra, and Hhean's biggest problem with Terra was how wonky the range combat is, and now they still have that issue in Core Blaze.
Yeah. Well, that was because though in Terra everything made you stop stat, which felt perfectly good in melee, but in range, I must admit, it felt really, really clunky because when you rage, you just feel like you always should be moving.
Yeah.
And one other thing they talked about at the Gaming and Game Show, but we saw it for the first time at E3, is dynamic events. And this is really cool. You'll get an announcement that something's going up. It's sometimes based on the weather, which is random. It's sometimes based on like you killed X monster at like Y time of the day, or you walked through this area with this NPC. The one we saw was like a zombie plague started spreading through like outside of the town, and it was coming from this stone. And the stone was being guarded by like Rafiki monkeys with like crazy masks on their face, and if you don't take them out and destroy the stone in a set limit, then like a god comes down and has to purify it himself, and he's all pissed at you. And in the meantime, all of the monsters in the area have like a zombie status, so they have more HP, they're more aggressive. If they attack you, it poisons you. And I was like, this is a really cool event to happen randomly. Normally you'd think a GM would have to orchestrate this, and no, now it's no longer the case.
I thought it was pretty cool. All the all the afflictions that the monsters can inflict on you, like there is a lot of debuffs that they can place on you that you have to like watch out, and so it really makes it more about evading their attacks, much like you do in Terra and Vindictus, etc., rather than just kind of like brute forcing them. Because it's not only do they take a chunk of your health out, but they'll probably afflict you with something that makes you slow or stuns you, etc. So,
What are you gonna say, Hhean?
I was gonna say, is it actually randomized? Like, do they actually have like some form of behind the scenes number generator, or is it more like Guild Wars where there's kind of like preset areas where if certain conditions are met by players, like you've already completed other
I think it's more like Guild Wars, yeah.
Okay.
I have to talk to them to confirm that, but I believe, yeah, it's something like that. What's up, Mikedot?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with the core Blaze, I mean, they mentioned that the game is an open world game, but is it really like open world with like a whole bunch of players can run around, or is it because a lot of the footage that I'm seeing, it seems to be instanced with up to only like 4 players in a party going out.
It's kind of like you go through portals and there's loading screens, but it's not instanced. And you'll see everything in a party because, I mean, that's how it's set up. Like, if you don't go into these places with a party, I tried just finding some random monsters, like the monkeys outside of town. They kicked my ass, partially because I didn't know what I was doing, but also because the game is designed around teamwork and, like, counterbalancing the weakness of each of the weapons. But it's also kind of cool because you can carry multiple weapons in your inventory and switch them out whenever you want. So depending on what the situation, you might be like, well, like the sword and board isn't going to be useless here. We're going to be chasing down a bunch of ranged targets that can bomb you from behind your back. So it really comes down to what do you need for each instance and who do you have with you to like cover each position.
Well, the game definitely reminds me of Monster Hunter, and I definitely love Monster Hunter. We definitely need more games like that. So it's definitely one I'm looking forward to. I'm just hoping that
it's less open world than Raider Z, but more open world than like Bounty Hunter Online or like Vindictus, Dragon's Nest, etc. It's kind of like in between Raider Z and all the other dungeon MMOs out there.
Yeah, my only issue with it is it's not quite as wide open world as in Terra. Like a lot of the sections seemed really narrow passageways.
Yeah, they're like funnels. They're designed a lot like Dragon Nest or Vindictus levels, but they're open world, meaning that anybody can be in there at a time. And if you keep going one direction, you will end up in another area. Like it will take you down the area, not just the end of the level. But it is kind of like that funnel design that a lot of those action MMOs have.
All right, well, we're hitting about our time limit now. Do we guys have any last thoughts on E3? Let's go down the line. What do you think, James Hunt?
I'm going to have to say End of Nations because, I was a big Command & Conquer fan back in the day, and knowing now that some of the same creators of the Command & Conquer series are in this, I honestly can't wait to get into like a huge match where, there's 52 plus, players on the board.
Jason?
On a non-MMO related note, I'm looking forward to Watch Dogs. I think it was nice that a game actually, that Ubisoft did actually announce a new title on E3. It's kind of an unusual thing these days. It looks quite a good game. And Age of Wushu is now on my radar. It looks quite cool.
I agree with you on both counts. Those look like they're going to be 2 awesome games. Mike and your bro, what do you guys think?
Well, basically, like E3 was it was really saved by the free-to-play market. Like a lot of E3 games that were shown at retail were really pretty much a washout, kind of just boring. So I'm just really glad that free-to-play picked up. And my brother has been really quiet about this. So I want to know what do you think, Isaac?
I think E3 is basically was saved by third parties. This is really about third parties. I feel like the first parties kind of just I guess it has to do with economic situations, but I think the third parties just kind of played it safe this year, and everything kind of was shown. Everything was kind of saved by third parties at this moment. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I think one thing I was really excited was the tech demo from Square Enix. I thought it was pretty gorgeous. If that's going to be what Final Fantasy is going to be in the next couple of years,
yeah,
I'm getting kind of excited for that.
Sweet. Shannon?
I'm actually most excited about the other Tryon games that we didn't get the chance to talk about. Rift is having its first expansion, and Defiant is in production, and the TV show is also in production, and those are the most things that I'm excited about from E3.
I agree with you. The first article I ever wrote for OnRPG was actually about the TV show that Trion's coming out with. So I've kind of a vested stake in them pulling that off and not making me look like a dumbass for supporting it back in the day. So let's go Trion. Let's do win for the team. And Michael, your thoughts?
PlanetSide 2. All about that PlanetSide 2. I think that was probably the most innovative, or if not one of the most innovative games shown off at E3. And I went back to that booth at least 4 times to play that game. And it was quite amazing to have. I mean, in that case, it was only like 100 players, I think, when at E3, but it's going to be up to 3,000 or 4,000 players at a given time in a persistent world. And I love shooters, so that's a big one on my list. And then a close second would be like Asia Wushu. I think that is as far as like a standard MMORPG, that was the one that impressed me the most from E3.
No doubt. I'm still jealous I didn't get a chance to play PlanetSide 2, man. I was just like drooling watching you and that guy play it in the booth.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I quite enjoyed the whole dynamic of, all these vehicles and all these players at one time in persistent world. It's pretty cool.
All right, thanks. That about wraps up our E3 coverage. Thank you, audience, for checking us out. We've got some really good giveaways coming up on both sites in the coming weeks, so stay tuned, and we're going to be wrapping up our E3 coverage within the next couple of days. Later, guys.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.